Hi and welcome to my second vlog, Skills versus Capacities, Speed and Agility. Now just to recap, a skill issue is when an athlete has, say, a motor control issue or a lack of experience with a particular exercise. So you'll often get coaching cues that assist with a skill issue versus a capacity issue. So that's when an athlete has an issue with their mobility or application of force. These are often overcome by various drills, exercises or stretches to make sure that the athlete is performing at their very best. We're going to test two athletes here, both with sprint acceleration and both with change of direction. So that will be assessing both speed and agility. Okay, so we're looking at athlete one. We're going to assess a skill issue. This athlete is inexperienced when it comes to track running and was given no coaching cues ahead of time. As we can see, his body angles throughout the first couple of touchdowns shows that he is quite inexperienced with the force production requirement that is needed throughout the acceleration phase. This begins with his starting position. His head's up, tracking where he wants to end up, but it should actually be a nice straight line from the top of his head through his torso. This continues into his first step where we see his shin angle and torso, which should actually be at about a 45-degree angle approximately. He's popped up straight away, so they're almost vertical. A common occurrence with inexperienced sprinters is that they pop up as though they should already be at max velocity without going through the required acceleration effort to really maximize their acceleration and their speed. This athlete's body angles should be all positive, so focusing on that horizontal force to really maximize the acceleration phase. Horizontal forces are key during acceleration, ensuring that the athlete is propelling forward, not upward, as we see him doing here. The knee drive also suffers, and the athlete isn't using his legs like pistons, as we often hear it being described. So pistons should be driving straight into the ground, then a direct line back to be in that position to do it again. Lastly, this athlete needs to be a bit more powerful and deliberate with each stride, so getting good separation between his arms and legs. It's important to test the athlete has the mobility to drive his knee up to and then slightly past 90 degrees. So on testing this, we can see that that's fine. The athlete has the mobility, has the range of motion. So it'll be up to coaching cues in this instance to get that knee drive higher and stronger, get those arms nice and strong and deliberate. There are a few drills that we can use to help the athlete visualize his body placement, one being the knee driving with both hands stationary on the wall. Once the athlete has that down pat, I've asked him to undertake a drill where he's on his toes, he falls into that first drive motion, so really driving that opposite elbow up, being very deliberate with the placement of his arms and his legs, and we can already see here that that position is absolutely improved on his first attempt. So just pulling that up next to it, we can see a really nice direct line through from the top of his head through to his ankle, and a much stronger knee drive with all of those positive body angles. The takeaways, I've just put them up here on the screen for athlete one. Most importantly, to maintain those positive angles with the body, that just comes from coaching cues, and we can see that he's already improved those. It will help him to generate the force required to really maximize that acceleration phase. Okay, with the second athlete, we are going to be discussing a capacity issue. So you see here pretty quickly, the athlete demonstrates a better knee drive than athlete one. However, what we notice is that the athlete toes out, meaning that she runs on her toes, and during acceleration, an athlete needs to have positive angles, which means that the shins need to be going forward, torso should be in a straight line with the leg that is driving into the ground. And importantly, in this athlete's instance, an athlete's leg should be creating an angle of around 45 degrees with the ground. Now, toeing out forces this athlete to contact the ground too early, happening out the front of the hip, which we see impacting the overall body angle, of course the shin angle, and subsequently pushing her vertical, not forward, which then creates a slowing down motion. She needs to be achieving dorsiflexion sooner and have each foot attacking the ground, spending much more time on the ground in those first 3 or 4 steps in order to apply as much force as the athlete can with each step. First, we're going to test whether this athlete has an adequate range of motion through her calves and ankles. Can she actually achieve an adequate dorsiflexion? can she get into this position? When using the knee to wall test on both ankles, we see that the athlete's ankle mobility is poor, measuring at 5 centimetres from the wall to her big toe on her left side and 3 centimetres on her right. It's widely acknowledged that each centimetre away from the wall that an athlete measures corresponds to approximately 3.6 degrees dorsiflexion. This is backed up in a research article titled Intra-rater and Inter-rater Reliability of a Weight-Bearing Lunge Measure of Ankle Dorsiflexion by Bennell, which means that this athlete has a notable restriction on her range of movement in her left and particularly in her right ankle. So what the athlete needs to incorporate into her program is some joint mobility drills and exercises to make sure that we're improving that range of motion as best as possible. As evidenced here with the athlete moving the ankle in and out of dorsiflexion to hopefully improve the range of motion that she's able to achieve in that ankle joint and of course the calf. Now it's important with any athlete that they do have ankle stiffness still in a sprint. This is so that the contact with the ground remains really solid. I've also had this athlete incorporate a few drills into their program to improve on dorsiflexion and ground force production. The first is the A skip, which sees her driving her foot down and underneath her center of mass. An extension of this drill is the B skip, which sees the athlete extending her driving foot out, promoting more dorsiflexion, and then exaggerating the foot's contact with the ground. The final drill I've had the athlete undertake is the straight leg bound, forcing the athlete to, again, drive that foot to the ground and really focus on that dorsiflex. It's hugely important. Recap for athlete 2. So the takeaways are that she needs to focus on joint mobility exercises and really focus on that force, so pushing her foot down through the ground to generate the force. Okay, back to athlete 1. We are going to be assessing a skill issue with the lateral shuffle to sprint. This athlete is fairly inexperienced with this movement, hasn't undertaken this exercise in many years. So we immediately see a narrow planting step, slow pivot, meaning that the knee drive occurs off center, limited knee drive anyway, and no deliberate arm drive, actually not using those arms really at all. Coming from the side here, we can see that the athlete really does come off center there on that pivot. Having already tested this athlete for mobility issues and finding none, I have asked the athlete to shuffle and actually decelerate into a stop, getting that proprioceptive feel of having that wider stance. All of the other changes are actually just based on coaching cues in this instance. So the first are drive your arms, drive your legs. Really good change here between the first attempt and this one. The next coaching cue is a wider plant step with a more deliberate pivot. So opening those hips up wider on the plant, approximately 90 degrees. Applying more force, particularly horizontal force. We can see that line through the leading shoulder there to be much more horizontal. From the side view, we can see a real change here, a nice strong knee drive exactly in the direction that the athlete's needing to go. Feet aren't getting caught up underneath him anymore. Really nice contrast between the before movement here on the slow motion where he actually moves out of shot. Great amount of improvement here for the athlete, just widening out that plant step, opening up the hips, faster pivot and stronger knee drive. For our second athlete, we're again going to be considering a capacity issue. When this athlete approaches that line and plants her foot, you can see that the lower extremity is in valgus, and then she presents with a knock knee effect in both knees. This knee pinching between the upper and lower leg then precipitates this slow pivot and inability to generate force. I worked with this athlete for many years. Due to COVID, I'm unable to show you a hip adductor test, but I do know, having worked with her, that she does have weak hip adductors. So what that means is that the adductors are not doing their job properly, forcing the leg to actually go into that valgus state to compensate so that the body doesn't tip towards the unsupported side. So what we've done is introduce hip adductor strengthening exercises into this athlete's program. I've asked the athlete to complete these twice a week for the next 3 weeks, just to see what kind of improvements we can make. Okay, so footage from the end of week 3 shows a huge improvement. So there's still a bit of work to do, but here you can see that the planted foot, so that knee is no longer in valgus, that's actually leaning now out and over the toe, which is great. We can also see this drive. She's able to get that some more force production there, which is fantastic. So strengthening the athlete's adductors has removed most of the knock knee effect, allowing her to drive more powerfully on her turn.